Nick Baldwin for BloodyElbow.com. Post-fight at LFA 68 here in Prior Lake, Minnesota, alongside UFC middleweight Gerald Meerschaert, who is in town to corner a few of his teammates from Rufus Sport competing on this card. Gerald, before we jump into what you've been doing lately, your career, walk me through how tonight unfolded. We had Mike Biggie Rhodes get back into the winning column, Rafian Stotts continue his winning streak, JP St. Louis with a big submission win, and then, of course, two fighters fall short, Craig Eckelberg and Nate Jennerman in the main event. How would you say, tonight went for you guys?
I'd say overall it was a good showing. Obviously with Craig's fight, it was lost by disqualification. Maybe bad judgment call on Craig's part. He threw a knee. His opponent said it hit him in the head. We looked at it. Upon further review, it really didn't hit his head at all. So they're going to look into that. Maybe something happen, maybe it won't, but, still got to pick your shots in a fight. Nate looked good at first, but, he fought a tough guy. He kind of ran in there and just got caught with an elbow. Biggie looked real good tonight. He had to deal with a guy who was a little frustrating at first, real aggressive, came out throwing some bombs. He had to make some adjustments. Got on his jab, got on his hands, made sure he controlled when he was on the ground, and I think that made the difference. JP looked excellent tonight. He worked his hands, checked a couple kicks, got in close, got the takedown, didn't rush it. When he was on top, he controlled and forced the guy into a bad spot to get the submission win. Rafian looked good, was really trying to put the guy away, but, he was a crafty vet, and, he was fighting to survive, and he did a good job of it. But Rafian Stotts is one of those guys that he needs to be in the UFC. Like, it's time to get him in the UFC for sure.
Do you think that happens? Does he have to go through Contender Series or something like that first, or should he just jump right into the octagon, do you think?
I think he deserves to go right in. If it was me personally, I can't understand why they haven't brought him in yet. Sure. So the one guy he lost to, kind of just got caught out of nowhere. It wasn't like he, really got beat up by anybody who's in the UFC, and, he's beaten just about everybody he can beat. They're like searching for guys for him to fight and can barely find them. So I think it's time to just call him up.
You're coming off a fight against Kevin Holland. It was a decision loss, I believe a split, and one that a lot of people disagreed with, you included. Talk me through that. You've had a little while. What card was it on again? I'm trying to remember. Philadelphia? Philadelphia. Yeah. So you've had 2 months, almost to the day, I think, yesterday to sort of, think about it and process what happened. Are you still frustrated with the decision?
Oh, yeah. I still got a chip on my shoulder. And, first and foremost, it is 100% on me to finish a fight. And that's one thing, I think, was a 97 or 98% finish rate. And even including that fight, it's got to be pretty close to it. So I think that's the fourth, maybe, decision I have in my career out of, almost 40 fights. So I always look for the finish. And, again, on me to finish the fight. But I just,
It doesn't always happen.
It doesn't always happen. And I went out there and I tried to. I implemented a game plan that, it was a short notice fight. They said, go get in there, get a hold of him, submit him. There were some things I could have done differently, I feel. Like, instead of being so grappling heavy on hunting submissions, would have been probably smart to do some damage and some ground and pound first. But I'm a guy with 20 submission wins. If I think I can submit somebody, it's hard to turn that switch off when you're going and hunting for the neck and stuff. But, you live and you learn. As far as the decision goes, the one thing I will say is the criteria that we're always told is based on effective striking, effective grappling, and octagon control. Well, I had the more effective grappling for sure, and I controlled the octagon for sure. The striking, neither of our faces were busted up. Neither of us really did much in the way of effective striking, so that's kind of the way I look at it. But again, it's my job to finish the fight. I didn't, so I got to live with it.
I'm curious, how many times have you gone back since then and watched the fight?
I watched it a couple times. This one I actually remembered very, very clearly. There were some things that I could have done better or differently or stayed on top more. And, it wasn't the most exciting fight. It would have been exciting. Like, I think right away in the first round I got close to getting his neck. And that's the thing. The tone changes if I do get the submission. If I get the submission, everyone's saying, like, oh, man, look, he's out there attacking, grappling, and wrestling and doing all this stuff. But because I did it, now it's a boring fight because there wasn't a finish and there wasn't, like, crazy striking. So, again, that's on me. It's like the only quote-unquote boring fight if you're not into grappling. If you're into grappling, it was still exciting. But if you're not, that was the one boring UFC fight I had. So now it's 2 losses in a row, which, that gives me a chip on my shoulder by itself. And now it's, the last fight on my contract would be the next one that's coming up, and I need to go out there and I need to put on a fucking show and beat somebody up.
Recalling the fight as best as you can, as you said, you remember it quite well, and watching it back, have you been able to figure out what the judges saw and how they scored it for Holland? Have you even just, a little bit, like some sort of excuse for the judges, or are you still kind of baffled by it?
I could see them giving him maybe the first round, if I'm remembering correctly, but other than that, I'm not really sure. Okay. I looked at, and another metric I looked at, we really got to discuss in this sport what we consider significant strikes, because they said he had like 100 or something like that. So they had to have been counting the slaps he was hitting me with, right. Which last time I checked, slapping someone is not a significant strike. It can be. I've seen people get knocked out from slaps in those, those slapping competitions you see on the internet. But again, you looked at my face, it wasn't even red, and I bruise easily. So like for you to not do any damage to my face, especially when like you supposedly hit me with significant strikes 100 times, is a little surprising. So I think in general, the sport's got to go back and say, like, hey, just because you hit them with something other than a jab, that doesn't mean it was significant. It's got to do damage or displace their body or make them do something else, not just whatever else they throw.
You've lost 2 in a row, and as you said, you have 1 more on your contract. Pressure's on, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, like I said, I got to go in there and I got to do some crazy stuff. I got to spin. I got to jump off the cage. I got to freaking do a flyman reverse triangle omoplata to like a knockout at the same time. Make sure I keep my spot in there. So that's what I'm looking for.
It sounds like you're willing, after this fight, after this controversial decision, it sounds like you're kind of willing to do just about anything to get that finish and not go to the judges.
Yeah, I mean, if I wasn't already before, I am now, for sure, because, that the only thing I could think of, like to your point before, is what they saw is like none of them are grappling savvy, because a lot of these people, they're employed by the state, and a lot of them have no background, or if they do have a background, it's like a lot of them come from a boxing background or something, or maybe point karate or something like that. Maybe once in a while you get a wrestler thrown in there. Almost none of them, because there's all generally older ladies and gentlemen, have like any jiu-jitsu, like any kind of criteria or experience whatsoever. So it's a really interesting thing that in a sport that jiu-jitsu is a big part of and grappling is a big part of, you don't have people that recognize the full spectrum of the game. And I think in my fight day it was like, oh well, this guy looked like he threw more punches, so I think he won. It's kind of a disservice to everybody when we have a lot of ex-fighters and different people, even from the old school, that have a much better understanding of what's happening.
Did appealing the fight ever cross your mind?
No, I'm not one to do that, really. I mean, again, they'd have to go back, and the same commission is going to look at it. They're going to see the same thing, is what I would think. And it's not like it was some egregious foul in there or something. So, and I'm not kidding myself. I didn't win by like a huge margin. I think a 29-28 was fair, but unless it was like, I had a 10-8 round in there and they didn't call it, then maybe I would see some grounds for doing that. But otherwise, like I said, the way I look at it is I didn't get the finish. I got to live with it. Whether or not I thought I won doesn't matter now.
You mentioned you have 1 fight left on your deal. Any idea when you want to get back in there? Anything in the works? An opponent, card, date, anything? Anything sort of coming up, targeted?
As far as I know right now, my management and my coach are shooting for August on that card that Anthony's on. So hopefully that works out. I try to stay in shape and stay ready. I've added some new things into my training that I wasn't doing before that I think are going to help a lot. So I'm looking forward to seeing when my next showing is.
I take it, considering maybe you don't have all the leverage in the world, you're kind of willing to take anybody they want you to fight?
I am, yeah. I mean, I was even offered a short notice fight not too long ago, and I always say yes to everybody. But it wasn't a fight that, my coach liked, and he was like, let's wait for a right fight because, you're down to your last one. Like, I don't want to bring you in as a B-side and, like, go take a fight just because you feel like you have to. Like, let's make sure you get the right fight and, really show them what you bring to the table. And
also a full camp, too, probably.
Yeah, and a full camp. Again, I'm always training, but, that's what they're there for. They're there to rein me in when I'm like, because, I'm a fighter. This is what I do. If someone says, hey, do you want to fight? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And he's be like, hey, maybe slow down. Like, we're just starting some new stuff. Like, how about we get you completely ready? Because, another way to look at it too is why shortchange the audience and everyone else when I could bring my best self.
Do you remember off the top of your head who they wanted you to fight?
Yeah. No, they talked about Deron Wynn, who's coming in. Okay. Never fought at 85, never fought in the UFC, and he had some words for me, and was really trying to get it out of me to fight him. And I told him, I was like, hey man, I was all about it, but I'm not the one. I don't make the final decision. And I don't care if anyone says, like, oh, I'm a man, I make my decisions. Like, no, I have a coaching staff and, a manager for this very reason because, especially my coaches, they've been there, they've done that, they know what's best. I'm going to listen to them. Like, they get the final say by default. So if they say no, then you're just going to have to catch that ass whooping later. That's all.
It might not have gone your way, but does that Jack Hermanson loss back in December keep on looking better? I mean, all of a sudden he has wins over David Branch and Jacare. He's one of the best, very best in the world.
Yeah, no, he's doing really good. And honestly, that's, another fight I feel like I kind of lost that before I got out there. I feel like I maybe overtrained a little bit and did some things beforehand that I could have done differently that maybe would have made me a little more energetic because, I went out there and I fought flat, and he fought a great fight. He fought just like he did against David Branch, and, he's looking good, and that's, real nice guy. Hopefully I can get that one back in the future, but, for now it's really good to see him doing as well as he's doing.
When you say you possibly overtrained for that fight, have you cut back a little bit since that fight, or what have you changed anything since that fight because you felt maybe you were overtraining?
Yeah, I'm doing some things differently, and when I'm really far out from fights, making sure I don't go crazy like I'm in a fight camp because I'm used to training year round. Started fighting when I was 19. You can train all the time. Now I'm getting older. I'm 31 now. That's not super old, but you don't recover like a young 20-year-old or a teenager. So you just got to do stuff a little bit differently and be smarter about it. And again, it's not anything that has to do with my coaches. It was like, the way I was, either overtraining or under-recovering, one of the two. And that's just on me to make sure that I get my proper rest and do everything I'm supposed to when I'm not at the gym as well to make sure I'm ready for that night.
Well, Jared, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it, and best of luck with whatever comes next for you.
Hey, good talking to you. Thank you.